Welcome into Off the Hook Sports. It is Thursday, July 18th. I am Caleb Calhoun. Dave Hooker still doing his rounds with lots of interviews in Dallas for SEC Media Days. That does not mean we don't have a monster show for you guys today. We got more interviews to bring you. Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, does join us today, believe it or not. We also got plenty of other interviews to get to, including DeArmond, Will West, and we also bring you Frangie to talk about the Florida Gators. There's a lot of interesting takes from SEC Media Days. There's a rumor that Drew DeArmond's interview with Dave will get to, that maybe Tennessee's connection to Jeremy Pruitt and the issues that happened there could have, ironically, fueled Nick Saban's retirement. I'm going to touch on that. That's actually a very interesting point. We're also, when we talk with Frangie, we're going to talk about Billy Napier and Florida and the state they're in. As far as some Tennessee news, Greg McElroy gave some massive praise to Nico Iamaleava, something we didn't see coming. And we'll close with some play calling news surrounding Tennessee football, because there's something shocking about that we want to get to. But first, before we get started, please hit that like and subscribe button, ring the bell, turn your notifications on, tell a friend, do everything you can. We're still building something great here at Off the Hook Sports, and these SEC Media Days events, the more you guys are involved, the more we can do them going forward. We're going to start recapping day 3 of SEC Media Days and also talking about the teams coming in on day 4. So, for SEC Media Days on Wednesday, there were 4 teams that took the podium in Dallas, Texas: Florida, Mississippi State, Alabama, and Texas. That's right, all 4 took the podium. All 4 kind of made news, to be fair. I actually want to start with Florida. And this isn't a 4 downs because it's a bunch of takeaways. But let's dive in with Florida for a minute. Because to be honest with you, Billy Napier, I feel like, has given up on the program. There, I said it. I think Billy Napier has given up on the program. Excuse me, guys. I'm sorry for some technical difficulties. I apparently had a sound issue. Please tell me if the sound has been fixed now. I had the wrong microphone on. We will start this over. Welcome to Off the Hook Sports. I'm Caleb Calhoun. Monster show to bring you. We have a lot to get to today. We have an interview with Greg Sankey joining the show. We've got Will West coming on the show. We've got a lot of different people, with Dave still doing the interviews in Dallas, and I got a lot to get to with rumors about Jeremy Pruitt and Tennessee. And we've also got more rumors about we've also got more stories about play calling. Guys, I just changed the microphone settings. Please tell me if the microphone settings are still off. If they are, we will figure out what to do. Let me try this. 1 second. Okay, everybody, how is it now? How is the microphone setting down? Give me a rundown. Give me a rundown on the settings now on the left side. I do believe I have fixed the issue, but it does kind of depend on how things are going. It should be better now. Okay, I'm going all in. You guys tell me what's... I apologize, guys. We've had massive technical difficulties throughout this week with SEC Media Days. So you just want to point that out. We are still... Okay, now it's better. All right, perfect. Okay, let's start this over. Welcome to Off the Hook Sports, everybody. Technical difficulties to start the show. We've had some technical difficulties throughout the show, but we're okay now. We got a monster show. We've got Greg Sankey speaking with us. That's right. The one, the only Greg Sankey joins us. We have Will West in an interview today. Dave Hooker still in Dallas doing his rounds. We've got Frangie from Florida coming around. Drew DeArmond of Alabama comes in and tells an interesting story that may connect Tennessee to Nick Saban's his retirement. Excuse me. Other Tennessee-related news, Greg McElroy has a ton of praise for Nico Iamaleava. We recap day 3 of SEC Media Days and dive into day 4 and play calling news surrounding Tennessee. We're going to get into all of that. Let's start, though, with a recap of SEC Media Days on Wednesday. Wednesday at SEC Media Days saw Florida, Mississippi State, Alabama, and Texas all show up in Dallas. And all of them made news in different ways. And I'm going to go just on a generic overall takeaway first.
I'm just going to take a shot at Texas. The Longhorns are thirsty for attention, guys. They are thirsty for attention. They tried to generate a ton of flash as if they're still in the Big 12 and they can run the show. And it feels like they're being allowed to by Greg Sankey with some of the scheduling that he's giving them and putting this in Dallas. But Steve Sarkisian went out and said that there was a police escort for the team from the airport to media days, as if that makes them unique. Texas has consistently gone out of their way for SEC media days to try to make the point that they are the premier SEC program now and that this is their conference and they think they're going to be able to run it like the Big 12. I think they secretly know they can't, so they're trying to generate more splash than they should. But the real story related to Texas out of SEC media days, I have to be honest, was a quarterback controversy that Sark may have accidentally leaked. Look, Quinn Ewers is a potential Heisman candidate. He shocked everybody by coming back this year. Steve Sarkisian randomly said that Texas is going to need both Arch Manning and Quinn Ewers this year. Why would he say that? That's a really weird thing to say because I would be under the assumption, I think most of us would be under the assumption, that if Texas ever needs Arch Manning this year, it's either because Quinn Ewers got hurt or because he's not performing up to the level that they expect him to. Which could be possible because they're entering the SEC, even though they have arguably the easiest schedule in the SEC. So my question is, why did Steve Sarkisian say that? Yes, you're going to need Arch Manning after this year, and I do think he's still an amazing prospect. You know, depending on what he's got up here, he could end up being the best Manning because he's got Eli Manning's arm and he's got Archie Manning's athleticism and Cooper Manning's athleticism from what we understand. The question is if he has Peyton Manning's head, which outweighed everything among the Manning family. But it's weird that Steve Sarkisian would say they're going to need both quarterbacks. You're not going to hear Josh Heupel say we need both Nico Iamaleava and Jake Merklinger. Heck, even last year when Nico Iamaleava was the future of the program, you never heard him say we need both Joe Milton and Nico Iamaleava. You don't really say that. You never hear Brian Kelly say, you never heard Brian Kelly say last year, we need Jaden Daniels and Garrett Nussmeier, even though everybody thought Nussmeier was the future of the program. That's a weird thing to say. And, I got to be honest, it lends itself to the idea that Steve Sarkisian is not as high on Quinn Ewers playing in the SEC as he was in the Big 12. I just don't know why you would say that. That's one of the first takeaways I got from the show yesterday and from the appearance. I don't really get why they would say that. Texas, if Arch Manning is playing at Texas this year, there's an issue if it's anything beyond mop-up duty. Moving on from Texas, guys, Billy Napier's given up. I'm going to tell you guys this right now. Billy Napier has absolutely given up. He's a dead man walking. And it was very clear yesterday that was the case. Billy Napier went to SEC Media Days, already kind of humiliated because of the situation with the Colorado transfer. Now at Florida, Cormani McLean. It was a big splash when they landed him. And he reportedly is already getting in trouble. This has been just a story with Florida. Their recruiting has massively suffered, so they don't even have that to sell. There were rumors that he was dismissed from Florida, but those dismissals have been debunked. And then he goes to SEC Media Days, and it's very obvious that he's done. And I don't think everything at Florida is his fault. I think Florida was not administratively prepared for the NIL era. I think that they tried to rush one together, and it cost them, and Billy Napier just wants to coach. I do think Billy Napier has his own issues. I think he micromanages. I think he has too many analysts and too many cooks in the kitchen, and that confuses people. So I think that creates its own issues. I don't think Billy Napier doesn't know ball, though, and I don't think he's not a good guy. But he said yesterday, if you watched him, he said the Gators as a program are still a, quote, work in progress. You return a starting quarterback. You're entering your third year at the University of Florida. There is no scenario in which your third year at a program should you still be a work in progress relative to having 2 straight losing seasons. Now, yes, theoretically, you could say Josh Heupel in Tennessee are a work in progress from when he took over. He still hasn't gotten the roster to where he wants. But even so, he went 11-2 in 2022 and 9-4 in 2023, finished off in the top 25 both years, and has failed to have a losing season since taking over. This work in progress thing. You don't say that entering your third year. Now, it was, I'll just bring back a little bit of history. And entering 2012, Derek Dooley did say, you're not going to have Tennessee to kick around anymore. And then SEC teams had Tennessee to kick around anymore as they went 5-7. However, it was very clear that 2012 team was significantly better than 2011 and 2010. The 2012 team was in every game. They were a good defensive coordinator hire away from going 9-3 that year. And I think Derek Dooley knew that you can't just sit there and say in your third year at a program, yeah, we're still rebuilding. No, you're not. You can't keep rebuilding forever. This is an issue. Florida's done, guys. Billy Napier's done. I watched it yesterday. Now we're gonna have we have some interviews that Dave Hooker did at SEC Media Days with people covering Florida, Frangie specifically, that suggest otherwise. But I've seen enough. Billy Napier's out the door after this year, and it's not fully his fault, but he does share some blame. The too many analysts is an issue, but he is a good guy. He's loyal. He keeps his word. The guy he promised all the guys he picked up at Louisiana with the Raging Cajuns his first year that he would be there as a 4-year guy, and he turned down offers after his third year. Billy Napier is a guy that you would love to develop and mentor your kid, but running a program, there's just too many issues there. And Florida itself is a disaster of a program too, with the way they're handling things. And I don't know if they're ever going to get it fixed. If they do, they're dangerous. But if they don't, there are some issues. Moving on to another team at SEC Media Days, Alabama. Kalen DeBoer is clearly doing the opposite approach of Nick Saban, and I kind of applaud it. He's being much more of a player's coach. He consistently says he's a player's coach. Well, he doesn't say it, but he's making it very clear with everything he does. He's a player's coach. He's trying to put his players out front and center. Now, there's still questions about Jalen Milroe in this offense. I got to be honest with you. Jalen Milroe is not Michael Penix, okay? Jalen Milroe is a first-read run guy. Nick Saban retooled the entire offense for him last year. Nick Saban pretty much ran the offense as a result. And Kalen DeBoer's offense depends much more on elite pocket passers or guys that can pick you apart like Michael Penix. So there are questions there, but it's very clear he's a player's coach. And quite honestly, with the level of intensity Saban brought to them for a long time, maybe this is exactly what they needed. Let me explain. Sometimes you can be pushed so hard, and it makes you better for it. And it does make you a better player, better person, or better at whatever you're doing. But then it can also be mentally draining. It sometimes actually helps more when you're push to be the best you can be, and then your boss or whoever's in charge of you kind of is a little bit more lax, and you already have those habits of pushing yourself so hard, but you don't feel the pressure from above, and it makes you perform at a high level. That could happen with Alabama this year. They have the talent. They have the players. The guys have been pushed and developed just like by Nick Saban already. And they already have the number 1 recruiting class for next year. As of right now, or the number 2 recruiting class. They're the hottest team on the recruiting trail. If that happens, those players could actually thrive this year for Kalen DeBoer because of what Nick Saban already did to push them. And then they just won't have the pressure from him the way under Kalen DeBoer, the way they would have from Nick Saban. As a result, you can see Alabama dominate this year. And if they dominate, they're going to maintain that recruiting class they have. And if they maintain that recruiting class they have, Kalen DeBoer's taking off. This program could actually start to remain elite and maintain the level of success that they had towards the end of Saban's tenure. You're not going to get what you had in the early 2010s with Saban when he won 3 national titles in 4 years, and when the college football playoff, even in the mid-2010s, was the Alabama Invitational. You're not going to get that, but you are possibly going to get a level of success that keeps them able to compete with Georgia, and that really stands out. And a lot of people like to say, oh, you never want to follow a legend. And I've broken with Jimmy Hyams on this. I've broken with John Adams on this. I've broken with Dave on this. The whole following a legend doesn't work out thing, that is humans psychologically creating a pattern that isn't there. What humans do, humans create patterns out of things just instinctually. Most head coaches fail, period. Most head coaches at big-time programs fail. They don't work out. Therefore, the majority of the time when a coach is following a legend, he's going to fail because the majority of the time coaches who are hired fails. But if you look at the success rate of coaches who follow legends at their programs, whatever your metric is of a successful hire, did they win a national title, or at lower levels, were they winning for a period of time? Whatever that metric is, the success rate of coaches who follow legends is probably no worse than the success rate of the coaches who are hired, period. because you can point out Alabama struggling after they moved on from Bear Bryant. I can point out that Florida State Jimbo Fisher followed Bobby Bowden and won a national title. I can point that out because and no one bats an eye at that. I'm saying this whole following a legend thing, it doesn't really hold water. I mean, two different coaches now, Kevin Ollie and Dan Hurley, have followed Jim Calhoun at UConn in basketball. Both have won national championships. They followed legends and they won national titles. This whole following a legend doesn't work. Again, that's only true because coaches who are hired in general turn out to be failures most of the time. Tom Osborne followed a legend in Bob Devaney at Nebraska, and then he ended up winning 3 national titles. So I don't buy that, and I don't think that because Nick Saban was a legend, that's going to make Kalen DeBoer suffer. That's not true. The only way it can make him suffer is if the NIL collective at Alabama thinks there's still a discount to go there because of Nick Saban, but it doesn't seem like they do. It seems like they've gotten on board. So moving on, the last team that went to SEC Media Days, and I really want to bring them up, guys, and that would be Mississippi State. Mississippi State has the best new offensive mind as head coach in the country in Jeff Lebby. Jeff Lebby's making a point that his offense is about to take over, which is why he brought in a transfer quarterback who just arrived in the program with him to SEC Media Days. He brought in Baylor Bears transfer quarterback Blake Shapen. Jeff Lebby developed offenses for Josh Heupel and Lane Kiffin in their 2 most successful years as head coach, 2018, Josh Heupel at UCF, 2021, Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. I guess theoretically you could say Lane Kiffin was more successful this past year, but it's close. They were 10-2 both regular seasons. Jeff Lebby's an offensive genius. Mississippi State actually has a more cutting-edge offensive coach than they had when they hired Mike Leach. They are ready to take over at least the state of Mississippi, and they were throwing shots yesterday. Jeff Lebby called Lane Kiffin childish for Lane Kiffin's subtle digs at him on X, but then said, "But I respect him, though." Kind of epic troll move. And my favorite is Mississippi State linebacker John Lewis comes out and trashes Ole Miss, their come to the sip phrase, and he says, "We own the state." Mississippi State is one of the low-key underrated teams of 2024. I'm not saying they're a 10-2 team or something like that. I think they may be a 500 team, but they're going to catch teams off guard with their offense. And here's one of the hottest takes I have. Tennessee is going to have a harder time with Mississippi State this year than they will Florida. Yes, Tennessee will have a harder time with Mississippi State this year than they will Florida. By the time Florida is coming to Knoxville, Billy Napier will already be effectively fired. At best, they'll be 3-2. At worst, they could be 1-4 going into Knoxville and be written for dead already. Mississippi State, on the other hand, will face Tennessee in November, and they will be roughly a 500 or just below 500 team with a bowl bid on the line. And I think they're going to go all in. And Josh Heupel and Jeff Lebby know each other too well. That could be a dangerous game if Tennessee's not careful. And we know that Tennessee is prone to November collapses. See South Carolina in 2022. I think Jeff Lebby in 3 years will be doing at Mississippi State what Dan Mullen did at Mississippi State during that run. I think he's that good of an offensive coach. I would have hired him years ago. I could be wrong. I may miss this, but I've always been high on him. All the way back in 2018 when Jeremy Pruitt, after Tyson Helton left, replaced him with Jim Chaney's offensive coordinator, I thought Jeff Lebby should have been the guy. It's about time he got a head coaching job. I am telling you guys right now, watch out for Mississippi State. And that ends our recap of Day 3 of SEC Media Days. Before we talk about the teams taking the podium at Day 4 of SEC Media Days, I want to point out that the show is brought to you by Ray Varner Ford.
Cab 4x4 STX, $45,985. 24 Ford Escape, $30,962. 24 Ford Maverick XLT, $32,720. Ray Varner Ford, your East Tennessee Ford dealership.
All right, before we get into interviews that Dave Hooker has been doing all day, including Greg Sankey. Greg Sankey will come around. We will have the interview with him shortly after 10:30. Say about 10:35, we will have that ready to go. But we first have to talk about teams taking the podium at SEC Media Days for Day 4. The SEC wants to make more of a splash with their predictions on day 4 with their all SEC teams and things like that. So they usually pick teams that they don't think are going to generate the most coverage. And they did pick 3 or 4 teams that are all expected to be in the 6-6 to 8-4 range, which is the ones who generate the least coverage. But there was one exception, and it's Arkansas. Arkansas's here with Sam Pittman. Arkansas just hired Bobby Petrino as offensive coordinator, who I think was forced on Sam Pittman, the same way I think Chip Kelly was forced on Ryan Day. I think those moves never work out and always get head coaches fired. Bobby Petrino was just in that situation last year when Texas A&M hired him with Jimbo Fisher and forced Bobby Petrino onto him as offensive coordinator. Newsflash, Jimbo Fisher has been fired. I think the question should be, I think every question for Sam Pittman is, does he know that Arkansas is working against him right now and trying to get him fired? There's no other explanation for it. This isn't a move. This is almost a lateral move for them. He's tried to run more of a spread offense since he's been there with Kendall Briles and KJ Jefferson and people like that. Bobby Petrino isn't running that. So they change and retool the offense to their detriment. I just want to know from Sam Pittman, does he feel like the administration is working to undercut him? And if they are, does he deserve it? That's kind of one of the tricky questions with Arkansas, that we don't know what's coming of that. But similar to Billy Napier, I'm willing to bet Arkansas will be looking for a new head coach at the end of the year. Or maybe they won't be looking for a new head coach. Maybe they will just have the new head coach, and that head coach will be their old head coach in Bobby Petrino as they're trying to recapture their glory days. Okay. Moving on from Arkansas, though, you have 3 perpetual 6-6 to 8-4 programs. Auburn. Hugh Freeze had the wildest first year I've ever seen for a head coach at Auburn. Now, whatever you think of Hugh Freeze as a person, and for those who don't know, I think very, very, very lowly of Hugh Freeze as a person, and I always have. They went 6-7, 3-5 in the SEC. It was a first year, so it's not much to judge too harshly on. Almost beat Alabama, but also lost at home to New Mexico State. And they won some games on the defensive side early in the year before the offense really took off, but the offense finally started to click late, except that New Mexico State game. They lost their bowl game to Maryland, but they didn't care to be in that game. Are they going to be more consistent under Hugh Freeze? If they can just develop consistency, then you could be looking at a much better team, because a consistent team would have probably gone 8-4 last year, something like that. That New Mexico State game, I just can't figure out. They were looking ahead, but they were, again, Hugh Freeze's offense. It's not like a lot of other offenses. It's kind of like the old Dave Paulson offense, which Tennessee fans knew all too well is a problem, which is that the first year in the system, players struggle with consistency wildly. There's just a lot to figure out. Now coming back, Hugh Freeze, I think, has a decent squad at Auburn, and I think that, look, they could be good enough to where oftentimes you can judge coaches by their second year. Hugh Freeze should be judged by his second year in the sense that he should have Auburn in the conversation at certain points in the year for the college football playoff. That does not mean they'll make it. That does not mean that they won't finish with 3-4 losses. But there should be talk about them at some point, maybe in September or something like that. And so I just want to know about the consistency and what the expectations are, and if they should expect to be potentially in the college football playoff conversation, especially with the start to the season they have. They host Alabama A&M, they host Cal, they host New Mexico, they host Arkansas. That should be an easy 4-0 start. And honestly, they host Oklahoma. And I think Oklahoma is a very winnable game, should get them 5-0. They could be 5-0 headed to Athens to face Georgia. So you could really see them at least in the conversation for the college football playoff up to that point. I don't understand why that expectation shouldn't be there. They're bringing in Charles Kelly, the Colorado defensive coordinator last year. The guy is a great defensive coach. So I think they know what they're doing there. And I think that's a big question for Auburn. Maybe Hugh Freeze can pray it into existence, because he's such a genuine man of faith. Sorry. I have my views on Hugh Freeze, and I will never change. I think he's a snake and a liar and a pig. And I don't care about his reformation that he did. I don't fully believe the story that happened when he got fired from Ole Miss to begin with. I think it's actually much more nefarious, but I'm not going to get into that. And I know things about his time at Briarcrest when he was the head coach there, when he was at the small Memphis private school back in the 2000s. Okay, moving on. That's my side rant. Kentucky. Does Kentucky expect to be on the cutting edge of offense this year in a way that complements Mark Stoops' defensive coaching? Look, Stoops is a great defensive coach. He is he has built a program at Kentucky that is ground and pound and win with defense. And that's hard to do in the SEC this day and age and do it while winning 8, 9, and 10 games, especially at a place like Kentucky that can't get the talent. They know what they are. They know what they can do. And Stoops does an amazing job. Mark Stoops is the dean of SEC coaches now with Nick Saban retired. This is his 12th year on the job. With that ball control offense, he's now looking to play ball control in a way that scores because he brought Bush Hamden, the offensive coordinator from Boise State, who runs the West Coast offense, to Lexington, and went out and got Georgia Bulldogs transfer Brock Vandagriff, who only transferred because Carson Beck is a generational talent. However, guys, Brock Vandagriff himself can be generational in a different way. He's very accurate and smart with the ball and has a quick release. Not about the arm strength. He was a 5-star because of how good he is at delivering the ball to where he wants to deliver it. That's the perfect type of quarterback for the West Coast offense. And not every team's going to be running that, and not every team's going to be prepared for it. So when you combine that with Mark Stoops' defense, because for those who don't know, the West Coast offense, while it seems a little more finesse because they spread the field, it actually very well complements a defensive-oriented team because there's so much ball control. Could the quarterback situation at Kentucky get the Wildcats to be a massive force to be reckoned with on both sides of the ball? Just saying, when you take that into account, they could be very dangerous. And Kentucky will at least start 3-1 with Southern Miss, South Carolina, and Ohio. I think they win all 3 games. Probably lose to Georgia, even though it's at home. They visit Ole Miss. They probably lose that game. But we're looking at Southern Miss, South Carolina, Ohio, and Vanderbilt. That puts them at 4-2. They visit Florida, but they've owned Florida recently. That puts them at 5-2. They welcome Auburn to town. They can be 6-2 for that. I'm just saying, Auburn at home could be a win. They host Murray State. That's 7. Host Louisville. Louisville was undefeated last year in the regular season, but I do think that, they weren't undefeated. They lost to Kentucky at home last year. They had 2 losses in the regular season, Pittsburgh and then Kentucky, but they were in the college football playoff race until they played Kentucky and they lost. So, and they were 10-2. One of their losses to Kentucky, who was 6-6 in the SEC. So I think this year going to Kentucky, they could lose again. Look, Kentucky could be an 8-win team. And people thought when the SEC went to one division that Mark Stoops would get exposed, taking advantage of the weak East. I'm not so sure that's true. The final question I have revolves around Texas A&M and Mike Elko. New Texas A&M head coach Mike Elko comes there from Duke. He's an Ivy League grad. He was very successful at Duke, matched David Cutlip's success, maybe even surpassed it his first year. I've always said there's a market for Ivy League grads who know football. Because if they know the game, their IQ is so far ahead of your average coach that basic in-game decisions will favor them. I talked about this yesterday. Josh Pate, speaking with Dave Hooker, mentioned Mike Elko and Texas A&M as his surprise team in the SEC. My question is, why shouldn't they be? And why are they flying under the radar? Guys, they loaded up with talent under Jimbo Fisher. We all forget that. It's not like Jimbo Fisher didn't bring them talent. He did. He brought them a lot of talent, okay? And while a lot of it is transferred out, a lot of it is still there. So you have to ask, why is Mike Elko not getting the love and Texas A&M not getting the love that they should? They still have the talent. They have a coach much more committed to the program and a coach who might be the smartest coach in the SEC this year. I'm just saying they could be title contenders. Let's stop sleeping on Texas A&M. And so I just want to point out, don't sleep on Mike Elko. Now, Smoky Mountain Red asked about Kentucky. Haven't they been saying what I'm saying with their last 2 quarterbacks? Yes, they have. Devin Leary ended up being a bust last year with Liam Cohen. I missed the boat on that. But Devin Leary, that was Liam Cohen coming back. There was a bit of a transition. The year before, Will West. I'm sorry. I said Will West. Will Levis. Excuse me. Will Levis. I just think he's overrated. No matter how much the Titans love him, he's overrated. I don't love the pick. I'm a Titans fan. It's going to be disastrous, just like the Marcus Mariota pick, just like the Jake Locker pick. I am so tired of being right about my Titans and them being wrong. They are terribly run franchise. They're absolutely awful. Okay, that's my other rant. Coming up in 2 minutes, we've got Greg Sankey on the show. Dave Hooker spoke with him recently. We're going to see what he had to say about the SEC and expansion and things like that. Stick with us. 2 minutes.
5th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Neubert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that. If we wouldn't put our family in it, we're not going to put their family in it. If you're going to say that you're doing the best work in Knoxville, Saying it's one thing, producing it and providing it's another.
The largest family-owned collision center in Knoxville is Joe Neubert Collision Center.
Hi, I'm Rick Terry, and we at Rick Terry Jewelry Designs pride ourselves in the highest quality craftsmanship from a family-owned business here in Knoxville for over 35 years. At Rick Terry Jewelry Designs, we also take pride in being an affordable option for all your game day accessories, especially those fire opals. At Rick Terry Jewelry Designs, we want to be your jeweler every day and especially on game day. Go Vols!
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare!
23 F-150 Super Cab 4x4 STX, $45,985. 24 Ford Escape, $30,962. 24 Ford Maverick XLT, $32,720. Ray Varner Ford, your East Tennessee Ford dealership.
Welcome back to Off the Hook Sports, guys. We are about to bring up Dave's interview with Greg Sankey momentarily. First, this interview and the show brought to you by Work Trucks. We're all about trucks that are actually available, trucks that help you maximize your profits by having the right work vehicle now. Time is money. The perfect work vehicle doesn't break down and has all the space to carry what you need. That's what Work Trucks is intent on offering, while other dealerships just can't do it. Contracting is about time. Work Trucks saves you time with less back and forth trips and trucks that pass the highest standards to be put to work. The process is also quick and easy when choosing a vehicle for Work Trucks. Cargo vans, utility body trucks with the Knapheide work bodies installed, pickup trucks of all sizes, and anything special like cranes or dump trucks. Work Trucks supplies vehicles to people just like you and get you back on the road tomorrow. No dealership runaround. If you're a contractor, you need to know Work Trucks, and that's a fact. Service industry, remember Work Trucks. Work Trucks carries the trucks that your business has to have. You need Work Trucks. Clinton Highway in Knoxville and in downtown Birmingham. For the entire inventory, go online to WorkTrucksLLC.com. That's WorkTrucksLLC.com with an X. Why risk chancing your future in business on the wrong piece of equipment that burns your time? WorkTrucksLLC.com. Work Trucks will also work to make sure that you have the perfect vehicle you have to have. They'll even find a perfect truck, outfit it, and make sure it fits your needs to a T. Work Trucks with an X. Work Trucks with an X, LLC.com. WorkTrucksLLC.com. Proud supporters of the Tennessee Vols. All righty, guys, we are bringing up Greg Sankey here. Dave Hooker speaking with Greg Sankey at SEC Media Days. Let's go ahead and get this rolling. Here we go.
Welcome back, SEC Media Days in Dallas, Texas. We're joined by the one, the only, the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference. Always love to visit with this gentleman. And did you ever think this would actually happen, Commissioner, that Texas and Oklahoma are actually going to be here?
Yeah, I did, as of about 3 years ago. It's just been a long runway to access this point in our history and in the history of both programs and college sports.
Is there a sense of pride for your office to actually get this done? Because like you said, it's been 3 years. When it came out, it seemed shocking.
Yes, and I'll start with myself, having lived in the Dallas area and having had conversations dating back to probably 2017 about we should put our Media Days event here in Dallas because of the impact we already had, to now do it at 16 and to do it in 2024. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of preparation, and we're not at the finish line of the event as we record this, but I think it's been the right thing, validates our decision making, and it is rewarding to experience.
These are two big-time teams. I don't need to tell you that. And I'm not knocking the other teams that have brought into the SEC, but the name recognition, the prestige, how significant do you think that is of bringing in Oklahoma and Texas?
If you look back at our expansions back to Arkansas and South Carolina moving, that was, in a way, cataclysmic. Some of that had happened around us. The Texas A&M move was, in a way, preset by the rumblings back in 2010. And then Missouri followed. And that was important, particularly as you saw what happened. And I think what you've seen relative to our expansion efforts is we've been on the leading edge, and we certainly were here. And I do think that the scope of this move is one that's historic. In fact, the media around can comment better than I can on how significant they view this move. But I think it's truly an impactful change.
I'm going to change gears. Sorry, no pun intended, but I do want to switch topics. And that is, you had Kirby Smart talk about Georgia coach, about how there would be fines for players that have potential off-field issue. Just in general, let me throw that at you and tell me what you think of it.
I think Kirby really has to speak to that. As I understand his answer, it was about the collective that has agreements with student athletes, essentially having some kind of conduct clause that gives them that freedom. I think that's the world we probably enter, but that's not some action imposed by me at this time.
Would that be good for the sport if it was widespread?
We need to eliminate a behavior that does not meet either societal or university or team expectations. And so the tools to do that, one can make their decisions around. I don't know if that's good or bad. I think that's a neutral piece at this point, but it's certainly novel relative to what others have described as accountability measures. I think we heard one last week in a different setting that was basically pretty low accountability.
Which one are you referring to there? Can you give me any insight
No,
on that?
I just
okay.
I love to be evasive.
I like that. As far as off-field issues, I see players that have a lot more money now, obviously with the NIL. And I wasn't the smartest 19-year-old. How concerned are you that suddenly there's a lot more disposable income to go around?
There are several concerns. One is the maturity needed to handle that amount of income and to use it wisely. So people will talk about generational wealth. Well, it's not generational wealth if it goes away quickly. And so how it's managed is something that we're in the educational process on each of our campuses, but people have to listen. It's not just enough to share the information on how to develop a financial plan, how to develop a financial management strategy. It is pretty interesting to talk to student athletes who are engaged actively, but we need that to be universal. The second is, at some point, the playing career ends. And we know statistically most of the individuals involved in college athletics will not be professional athletes, which means you have to step into your career, your job role. That entry-level experience may be at a very different salary than somebody's been accustomed to because of these large name and likeness payments. I actually think that's a long-term threat that has to be understood. And then the third is, man, when I was 19, like you, I could get distracted and confused by the amount of money in my pocket if it were that large relative to my education. I worked on construction jobs, and my parents were clear that, hey, you're going to make great money, but don't think that's your future. And that was small compared to the numbers I see now, but I think still is representative of the distractions that can pull people from lifelong preparation to short-term, because of short-term decision-making, that then have long-term impacts.
I have a theory, and I can't think of anybody better to throw it at than you. I think there are less players, maybe the Georgia situation was standing, I think there are less players getting in trouble because I think that they are less resentful now that they're getting NIL pay. I think they treat it oftentimes, not all the time, I'm making a blanket statement, but I think they treat it like a job more so than something that maybe they were taking advantage of, at least in the way they viewed it.
Okay, that's a hypothesis. I could hypothesize that some recognize there's a much higher level of scrutiny in their lives, and they're educated on that. So there's probably several factors that alter behavior, but that doesn't mean that everyone's going to meet expectations, and that relates to oversight and the right kind of accountability.
Your thoughts on scheduling, what you want to do after the season? And
the season allows us to do a few things. One, we've done a lot of preparation on decision making for 26 and beyond. We made decisions to stay at 8 games for 24 and 25 to basically mirror the schedules for those 2 seasons. That way everybody gets to see teams, opponents on an equitable basis, home and away within their grouping. We're going to go through a season of a single division 16-team league. That will be a learning experience. Hopefully it validates our decision making to this point. And then we go into a 12-team playoff where we want to understand the selection process. We want to make sure that the criteria that's been established is consistent with the way teams are evaluated. I think that can be really difficult comparing maybe a 9-3 team to an 11-1 team, that 9-3 team having played an incredibly tough schedule. Then that puts us to probably first quarter of 2025 to really get into the decision making for 26 and beyond.
Commissioner, certainly appreciate it. I remember when the Texas and Oklahoma thing actually happened. I thought this is crazy, and kudos to your entire department for getting that done. I think everybody's excited about it.
Yeah, it's our future. It's great to be here in Dallas, to bring many who've been part of SEC Media Days for years and years into a new location with our new membership and a really exciting future. So thank you for the conversation.
He is the one, the only Commissioner Greg Sankey. I'm Dave Hooker, off Doug Sport.
That was Greg Sankey speaking with Dave Hooker at SEC Media Days. Once again, that interview brought to you by Work Trucks. Said a lot of interesting things, but as you guys know, Greg Sankey is the ultimate politician, so you're just not going to get a lot from him. The guy, I mean, is the king of what we say Josh Heupel is. He says it for the SEC. He says a lot without saying anything. It can kind of drive you crazy at times, but that's always been his thing. So we're gonna move on now. We are going to go to Dave now speaking with Will West. Will West spoke with him on earlier this week, and they talk a little bit about the state of the SEC in general and also the Vols. So we're going to pull that up right here. This is Dave Hooker speaking with Will West about the state of Tennessee athletics and the SEC. Let's go ahead and get this started, and then we'll break down some of the interesting things he said.
Welcome back. We broadcast live from SEC Media Days, brought to you by our friends at WorkTrucksLLC.com. That's WorkTrucks with an X, LLC.com. That's right. And also our friends at Volunteer Automotive Group. Joined by Will West of the Sports Animal Afternoons. Does a fantastic job. And Will, SEC Media Days, your thoughts?
It's been kind of boring. I'm just going to be honest with you. I've been waiting on even the people who normally will cut a promo like they're in Monday Night Raw haven't said a whole lot. So Kirby Smart I thought was interesting because Kirby doesn't say things or words to humans that aren't getting his video queued that he can watch. But I thought Kirby really kind of tried to take on the mantle of the elder statesman in the SEC. That was interesting. Josh Heupel was a lot more laid back than I can remember Josh Heupel in public situations being. Everybody else, Venables I thought was even nice, and usually Venables is a guy that's going to say something about somebody. We'll see what Sark does. I mean, Sark's a little salty later on, but it's been wild, kind of like even Drink didn't crack jokes or anything like that. So the players have been the ones that have kind of been the star, I think. And a lot of that is because the coaches have pushed the players to the forefront, and the coaches have taken a little bit of a back seat. I don't know if that's NIL related or if it's about, hey, I don't have to deal with this if I just send my players out there. But I think the players have kind of been the stars of the show, whereas, this is my 12. Usually the coaches are the star of the show.
Yeah, sure. I want to talk Tennessee, but let me get back to what you said that I found interesting. Kirby Smart, is he capable of taking the mantle that was Nick Saban? Because Nick Saban, have a commissioner or not, but he was the leader of the conference, I thought, for a lot of years.
And he also, Nick Saban, when he wanted to speak for the good of the sport, I think he really was looking at the whole sport. We've had moments where Kirby Smart's tried to do that. Do you remember 2 years ago with the, I'm not going to be here if we're paying players $100,000 a year.
I want to get to Tennessee, but something you said earlier has me interested, and that's Kirby Smart. Is he capable of taking the mantle from Nick Saban and being the leader of the conference?
I don't know that anybody else can, right? There's no one else that's in the position to be able to. I don't think he'll do it the way Saban does. Because one thing Saban would do is, right, wrong, or ridiculous, Nick Saban would, what he believed was the best for college football is the thing he would speak to. It's not always Kirby. It's not always what he does, right? Kirby gives his own opinion as opposed to what he believes is the best thing in college football. But I thought he kind of made a transition on Tuesday when he was here, and it was shocking. Speaking of Georgia people that cover for the beat, that just Kaylee Mansell from Dog Nation said, "Yeah, I've been covering the beat for 2 years." He said more today than he has said to us in all of the practices that I've covered combined.
That's interesting.
So he's trying to take that step. We'll see how capable he is.
Turn to Tennessee. There were 3 players here. None of them rhymed with the name Rico.
Yeah.
Yet he was asked about frequently. But Tennessee, in retrospect, makes a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they did. Well, they missed an opportunity. But I think for them, they're willing to miss the opportunity because I think that there are certain guys, Heupel, Dan Lanning, PJ Fleck, their seniors run their practices. And culturally, it works out really, really well for them. But for those but you will miss opportunities like this because you have to earn the right to go represent the team. It can't just be the players who are the most popular. Like you said, Oklahoma, Jackson Arnold was there, right? So Nico was not. So I think it was a missed opportunity for Tennessee. I don't think it's going to make them win or lose a single game, but you had an opportunity to get your brand out there publicly. Instead, no one cares, no one paid attention. And so it's if you win a lot of games, you can do that. You can get away with doing that kind of thing where you don't have to worry about building your brand or making sure that you get your messaging out. You better win a lot of games because the second you stop doing those things and you go 7-5, you don't have nearly as much publicity.
I'm curious if you came away with a takeaway that Caleb and I both had, Caleb Calhoun, our host, and that was, I think Josh Heupel likes his defensive backs, which I haven't said ever, and I think that he might have a good group back there, or at least one he likes.
I don't think it matters a ton. Does that make sense? Like, I watched them win double-digit games with the 125th ranked pass defense in America. It was 128, and so 2 years ago. So I don't think it matters a ton, but I do think he likes the players and the options that are there more than he has in the past. I think he likes the depth there. I think he likes the depth at linebacker. I think he likes the depth that he has at defensive line because they have just been pretty darn makeshift when it comes to everything that they've had to do on the defensive side of the ball, especially. Like I had a guy yesterday from a Louisiana radio station that asked me, "What do you think is going to happen? I mean, you lost those starting linebackers in Tennessee. You think their linebackers will be okay?" I'm like, yeah, 2 years ago as a converted running back and a guy that was working in the SID's office with another year of eligibility, they were starting at running back or starting at linebacker.
What preseason magazine did he read?
Yeah. So he was like, "Oh, I just saw that Tennessee lost their top 6 tacklers." I'm like, "Yeah, those guys weren't going to play." So like it's Kamal Hadden, that's a loss. Everybody else, meh. You know what I mean? I don't know that it's not good riddance a little bit.
I tried to make an argument for Wesley Walker, but I lost.
Yeah. Well, I don't think he's a bad player. I just think that there are a lot of those. There are a lot of Wesley Walkers out there. I don't think that like Herring. I don't think he was a bad player. I think he needs to go play at the mid-major or something like that. And I think that's what he can go do. Aaron Beasley had a great Orange Bowl. Kind of wanted to run underneath tackles and not take contact last year a lot. As a linebacker, you can't do that. So I think Keenan Pili, Arian Carter, I think they'll be much better. T-Lander is not afraid to stick his helmet into somebody. I think Tennessee's going to be a lot better on the defensive side of the football.
I do too. He's Will West of the Sports Animal. You can listen to him 3 to 7 each and every weekday. We certainly appreciate the time. More from SEC Media Days off the Hook Sports.
That was Will West of the Sports Animal. Dave was able to interview Josh Ward earlier this week, also of the Sports Animal. Will West brings a couple of good points out. I've been saying this for a while. Returning starters is a benefit. I'm not one of those people that chucks it out the window. Returning starters and team chemistry is huge. The question is who's returning a lot of times. And Tennessee cut bait or lost players that maybe would have helped their chemistry this year, but they add players or they have more experienced players who are waiting in the wings who will be upgrades at the positions this year, particularly on defense. When you factor that in with them upgrading at quarterback, we all believe they will with the quarterback who was already in the system last year, you see that the loss in talent does hurt them. But they returned all the guys they would want to return. Kamal Hadden, he brought it up. That's the only real loss Tennessee had from last year that I can think of. You guys and Jalen Wright, Kamal Hadden and Jalen Wright are the 2 real losses. And without Jalen Wright, Jabari Small is a loss because I don't think Tennessee has a running back. So even like, and our old guy, Jacob Warren, too, from a leadership perspective, Jacob Warren is a loss. But I mean, I mean, like, what, 4 guys? Jalen Wright, Jacob Warren, Kamal Haddon, and Jabari Small. And Jabari Small is not as, and Jalen Wright and Jabari Small are like a co-loss. Everybody else they lost, they're not really going to miss, guys. I've been saying that from the start. They're not really going to miss everybody that they lost. And they've upgraded with players they brought in through the transfer portal and players who were already in the system that now have more experience. That helps them too. So it's not like the experience is lacking with the new starters on the team. The chemistry is still there. And I think you're going to see that show, particularly when so many other teams are built through the transfer portal and have no experience. I actually discounted chemistry for a long time back in the day because everybody had players wait. Returning starters didn't matter as much from a chemistry perspective because the players that replaced them were already waiting in the wings and part of the program. But in the era of the transfer portal, chemistry is a big deal, and returning starters, or at least returning players in the program, is a big deal. And Tennessee has a lot of returning players in the program. They've plugged the right guys in via the transfer portal, and that's the way that should be done. So I do agree with Will West. I also agree that my thoughts on Nick Saban's altruism, I think Nick Saban does care about the state of college football and is altruistic now. I think when he was head coach at Alabama, he took fake altruistic stances that were always for the betterment of Alabama. But hey, that's what you're supposed to do when you're the head coach of the program. His job was for Alabama. It was not for everybody else. So I really don't necessarily blame Nick Saban for doing that, if you want my honest opinion. Before we get going, or when we come back, I want to bring up the fact that the show is brought to you by Banks and Jones.
Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks and Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks and Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks and Jones. T. Scott Jones. BanksandJones.com.
The show also brought to you by Medicare Misty.
19 years this year. I've been in the community since 1993. You're getting a lot of information. Unlike when you were working, they made the choice for you. Now you have to make the choice. Come to us and let us help you make it easy. Call Medicare Misty, MedicareMisty.com or 423-777-5577. Let us help them sleep at night.
And we call her Medicare Misty.
Welcome back to Off the Hook Sports. We've got Drew DeArmond to talk a little bit of Bama football and Nick Saban's retirement coming up, and also Frangie to give his thoughts on Billy Napier. But first, what do we make of Greg McElroy, guys? Greg McElroy took a weird shot at Tennessee when the baseball program won the national title. Attacked Tony Vitello for, I guess, doing some, acting like a WWE wrestler, and said it was embarrassing for him to jump in the stands with his fans. We all lit him up for that cover the Vols, and also Vol fans did. To his credit, he came out and apologized. Ever since then, now that the talk has moved from baseball to football, because now we're in the college football preseason, and that's dominating all college sports stories, Greg McElroy, the former Alabama quarterback who won a national title in 2009, seems like the biggest Tennessee football fan among media members right now. While so many people are underrating Tennessee, I think, analytical ratings suggest they're a borderline top 20 team. EA Sports College Football 2025 video game doesn't even have them top 25. Most analysts have them in the 10 to 15 range, maybe even 15 to 20. Even local media thinks 9-3 to 10-2 would be a good season for them. Greg McElroy is through the roof high on Tennessee. And with 11 of 16 SEC teams bringing quarterbacks to media days and Tennessee not being one of them, Greg McElroy on ESPN still managed to mention Nico Iamaleava as a potential Heisman winner. McElroy said, quote, "I like Nico Iamaleava. I think Tennessee is a top 10 team. I know I'm probably a little higher on them than most. Other people are still in wait and see mode, which I totally support, and I totally get that. I just think that if Tennessee is going to be as good as I anticipate them being, that means he's going to have a ridiculous year. He's right. He's right. I agree. I also agree with this. If you think Nico Iamaleava is the answer for Tennessee, and this is something I'm going to call out media members for. If you think Nico is the type of player that would return Tennessee to what they were with Hendon Hooker, if you think he's that player for Tennessee, why would you not think they're going to be a national title contender? They were a national title contender with Hendon Hooker. They were number 1 in the college football playoff rankings in November in 2022. If you think they're going to return to that offensive production, why do you think that then they would be a 9-3 team? That makes them closer to Tennessee with Joe Milton last year than it does with Hooker in 2022. And consensus is that Joe Milton was not a fit for this offense. So why do you think that if Joe Milton wasn't a fit and they still went 8-4 and finished 9-4, that they would still be closer to that range than they were in 2022 with Hendon Hooker, who would have gone to New York were it not for an injury? That just doesn't make any sense. And I think Greg McElroy, to his credit, is looking at what's being said about Nico, looking at what's being said about the program and saying, wait a minute, we know about this Josh Heupel offense. We know what he did in 2022. We know about the records it put up. It's inconsistent to think that Nico returns them to that, maybe even takes them to another level, because I've said he is created in a lab to run this offense, but think that they can't return on-field win-wise to what they were at. I just don't believe that. And so I love Greg McElroy being honest and saying Tennessee's a top 10 team. I've been saying from the start that Nico Iamaleava should be a low-key Heisman contender. I don't understand why his odds aren't a little bit higher. Vegas, to be fair, is actually higher on him than many media members. And the truth of the matter is, again, if Hendon Hooker was going to go to New York had he not gotten hurt, why should we not believe Nico Iamaleava is going to be going to New York? I think that's the point Greg McElroy is making, is that Nico Iamaleava should be going to New York if Tennessee's to do what Tennessee needs to do. Derek brings up Nico hasn't played in a nail-biting game. Tennessee will be in a handful of them early this year easily. I agree, Derek. And I think that's actually what's going to help elevate Nico Iamaleava's profile. I keep telling you guys this, and I'm sticking with it. By October the 1st, the Josh Heupel, Nico Iamaleava combo will be the sexiest topic in college football. Everybody's going to want to be talking about it. It will surpass the Colorado talk. Now, I do think Colorado and Deion Sanders will do better this year, so I think they'll generate more coverage into October than they did last year. They were done by October. But I think Josh Heupel, Nico Iamaleava is going to be where everybody's going to put their eyes on. It's just going to be the most fun team to watch in college football. What's going to happen is they're going to escape NC State as they're still kind of developing chemistry, the way they escaped Pittsburgh a couple of years ago. And then at the end of September, they're going to travel to Norman and face Oklahoma, and the center of the college football universe will be on that game. And Nico Iamaleava will deliver with the center of the college football universe on that game, with Josh Heupel trying to get revenge on Oklahoma. In the process, there will be a blowout, and it will have everybody talking about Nico after that. It will be reminiscent of, I've always told this story, go back to 1995, the game that had everybody in the nation talking about Peyton Manning as a special quarterback. It was his sophomore year. He had a great first year, finished 8-4 after he took over as a starter for a 1-3 team. He had a decent start to 95, had a loss to Florida. Middle of October, they went to face Arkansas. And Joe Lee Dunn was the defensive coordinator at the time and was considered one of the best defensive minds in the SEC at that time. David Cutcliffe and Peyton Manning put together a game plan that just absolutely led to Manning torching Arkansas. I mean, throwing the ball all over the field, absolutely dominating them. For the record, Arkansas won the SEC West that year. The game was in Arkansas. They were a top 20 program. That was the game that had everybody starting talking about Peyton Manning as a special, rare quarterback. Oklahoma will be that game for Nico Iamaleava. And kudos to Greg McElroy for seeing it. I guess the question is Greg McElroy trying to make up for what he said about Tennessee baseball? Or does he genuinely believe that Tennessee is a much better team this year than they're being given credit for? And is he basing that off what the media itself is saying about them? I mean, again, I don't know. Greg McElroy did that attack on Tony Vitello earlier this year was one of the least sense-making attacks in the history of attacks or criticisms in college athletics. It made no sense. To his credit, he did retire. He did apologize, but I couldn't figure that out for the life of me why he said it. Now, and to be fair to Greg McElroy, I think it is actually the way he believes. Remember, he said back in February, he said, quote, Nico Iamaleava feels like he's the answer. He feels like he's the answer. That Tennessee could have the breakout star in college football this upcoming year. Greg McElroy said that in February, weeks after Michigan won the national title. I've been seeing that for a while, that they've been all in on 2024, and 2023 was for them to bide their time and just stay above water with Joe Milton while Nico got in football shape and got ready to go, and they maintained the chemistry with Milton being the starter. I think that everything is about Nico and the offense and the chemistry they have in 2024. That's why they opened the NIL checkbook, not to load up on transfers, but to get key players they had to come back, i.e. Cooper Mays and Omari Thomas, two of the best leaders on the team. There's a reason they're both at SEC Media Days, and the same with Keenan Pili, by the way. Guys, in January, we didn't know if any of these guys that are at SEC Media Days would be on the team this year. So I think the leadership combined with Nico now and everything that Josh Heupel put into Nico leads people like Greg McElroy to believe that they are going to dominate, that they will be a breakout star. So this isn't new for Greg McElroy. I'm just going to say it. I don't think he is doing this to make up for what he said about Tennessee baseball. I think Greg McElroy was stuck in 2022 with his thoughts on Tennessee baseball and projected the way he felt about the baseball program in 2022 onto Tony Vitello after winning the national title in 2024. I thought that was highly unfair, but I understand it. There are times I have projected problems I've had with people in the past to things done on them in the future. Everybody does that, okay? Judges and court do that, okay? If two people are facing trial for the same crime, a judge will give a more lenient sentence to one who has never committed a crime before than he or she will to somebody who has committed multiple crimes before. We judge actions differently based on your previous actions. I just thought that went way over the top with Greg McElroy and Tony Vitello. And so it was a little bit extra. Put it that way. Just a little bit extra, if that's the best way to say it. Because all Tony Vitello did was celebrate with the fans. But I don't think Greg McElroy has some Alabama fandom agenda against Tennessee. I just don't think that's the case. And I think a lot of his track record is showing that. All right, speaking of Alabama, this guy we're about to bring on, Drew DeArmond, has an explosive story that you're going to want to listen to about why Nick Saban may have retired, and it may have something to do with, shall we say, Jeremy Pruitt and his issues at Tennessee. We're going to bring that up real quick. I just want to point this out. We don't know that this is true. Drew DeArmond would say himself this is speculation, probably. But it's very interesting what he said about why Nick Saban may have retired. Here's Drew DeArmond of ESPN The Zone in Huntsville talking about Nick Saban's retirement and how it might be connected to Tennessee football. Let's get.
Welcome back, SEC Media Days. Coverage brought to you by WorkTrucksLLC.com. That's WorkTrucks with an X, LLC.com. And our friends at Volunteer Automotive Group. Go to volauto.com, volauto.com. We're joined by Greg DeArmond of 97.7 The Zone in Huntsville, ESPN's affiliate. Greg, thanks for taking the time.
It's Drew. But yeah, absolutely.
Drew would be a better name to call you. And I'm Bob. Sorry, Drew.
No worries, man.
My apologies.
I've been called worse, but no, it's great to be with you, Dave, and great to talk some Alabama. It's been a huge day today for the Tide and a new era of Alabama football with Nick Saban being gone after 17 great years. But the Kalen DeBoer era is underway, and we're excited.
Well, let me ask you about that. So the expectations, chances are that Kalen DeBoer is not going to be Nick Saban, right?
Right.
But what are fair expectations?
Well, in year one, I think fair expectations are to get to the college football playoff and be in contention for the SEC championship. Can they win it? Yeah, if things fall right. But even if they don't, getting to the college football playoff, I think with this roster, winning 10 games, I know it's a very difficult schedule with some road trip to Tennessee. Going to be difficult. We saw what happened 2 years ago. Road trip to Norman, Oklahoma right before the Iron Bowl. even a tricky one early, week 3 against Wisconsin, and Luke Fickell, who I have a lot of respect for. That's a tricky one too. And then, of course, it's always going to be tough, even at home. Georgia, the Bulldogs probably have the best roster in the league. And then Missouri, who I think is a dark horse SEC championship and playoff contender. That'll be another tough game for Alabama. It's a difficult schedule, but it's manageable.
Drew, you shared a story, and we were just at the lunch area, and I overheard it, and I was hoping you could share it with my listeners and viewers, and that is why Nick Saban may have decided to retire, and it had to do with assembling a staff, you were saying, as much as anything. Can you kind of relay that to my listeners?
Sure. Coach Saban was trying to make some adjustments. And if you know it, Dave, he in 17 years never brought back the same staff. So he was always having to lose guys at either coordinator positions, head coaching jobs. So he was always losing coaches. But, as time has gone on, he's 72 years old. And he had told Greg Byrne, at the end of last year, this is going to be a year-to-year thing. And so that gets out in coaching circles. And so I think
Greg Byrne, the athletic director.
Yes, the athletic director, Greg Byrne. And I think a big part of it too, and your listeners will know this about backwards and forwards, was that Jeremy Pruitt, after his issues with the NCAA, is not in coaching right now on the college level or in the non-professional. He's at the high school level at Plainview High School back in his hometown in Alabama. He wasn't going to be able to get that. Coach Saban couldn't get Pruitt back. Pruitt, he and Kirby Smart were the two best he ever had to do it. And he spent a lot of time, Coach Saban did the year before, trying to get Pruitt back because they thought he would be cleared potentially, and maybe through his lawyer they could work out a deal with the NCAA and be back to Alabama. But it didn't happen. And once he wasn't able to bring him back, Kevin Steele was brought in. But Coach Steele, Tennessee, very familiar with him, a Tennessee alum, a guy that's coached at Tennessee, coached all over the SEC. It became obvious when they hired him late that he was only going to be a one-year guy. I mean, I thought when he signed the 3-year contract, he'd at least coach 2 of them because I thought Coach Saban would keep going. But, Coach Steele decided he wanted to retire. That, for a lot of these old school guys, the NIL, the transfer portal, they just don't want to deal with it. And so Coach Steele had a great career, decides to hang it up. And so he knew Travarius Robinson wasn't defensive coordinator material. He had been a defensive coordinator at Florida and South Carolina. But I think, from what I've understood, last year they tried to give T-Rob more responsibility, but there was a lot on Coach Saban's plate. And Kevin Steele just didn't have the energy to keep going. And he knew after the season, I've got to find a DC. And because it was just one of those things where, look, T-Rob's a great recruiter, a great secondary guy, but he's not a defensive coordinator. And he wanted T-Rob to stay in that role, but T-Rob wanted to be a DC, wanted to, continue to and move up the ladder. And also, word started to leak out. T-Rob wasn't sure Coach Saban was going to continue to be there. He's like, I don't know. I don't want to commit to something long-term because, again, I don't know if you're going to be here. And so he tried to reach out. He tried to hire Bo Davis. Same thing. I mean, Bo and Coach Saban have a very good relationship. But, Bo was like, Coach, I love you, but I don't know how long you're going to be there. And so it was just becoming very hard to put a staff together.
I can see that, and Pruitt was part of it. So I don't want to put words in your mouth. Are you telling me that if Jeremy Pruitt was available, didn't have the NCAA issues, that Nick Saban might still be the head coach?
Oh, I think there's a great chance. Because wow. I just think Jeremy, if you go back and look at the run Jeremy had under Coach when he took over after Kirby left in 2015, 16, 17. 16 was his most talented team that didn't win. And 3 key injuries, Bo Scarborough, Sean Deion Hamilton, Eddie Jackson kind of derailed that. But they had a great team. They won it all in 17, and then Jeremy came to Tennessee. So, but I just think that he and don't forget, the first hire Nick Saban ever had at Alabama was Jeremy Pruitt. He hired him from Hoover High School to be the first analyst that nobody had ever heard of. We didn't have analysts back then.
We all have like 1,500.
Yeah. So he hired him in an off-the-field role. So they had a very good relationship, very close relationship. And I still believe if he could have brought in Pruitt and hadn't had to take on so much of a heavy load defensively, I still think there's a chance he might have stayed because I just think that he had a hard time because Pete Golding, he tried to mold Pete into the same kind of guy that he did with Muschamp at LSU, Kirby and Pruitt. But I just don't think, and we'll see, he's going to get his shot at Ole Miss this year because Pete, they got a great roster. A lot of people think they're going to make the playoff. I don't think Pete's elite. And I think, he wanted to keep grooming Pete, but Pete decided he wanted to go elsewhere. And I think he felt like he'd had 5 years of Saban. It's not easy to work for him. And so I think Coach Saban wanted to go back to what he's familiar with. That's Jeremy Pruitt, and he couldn't get it. And what I mean by that is I think it was the first domino in the thing that kind of led to him retiring, because Jeremy Pruitt knows his system backwards and forwards, and he knew how to adapt it. He was the first one to get Coach Saban to simplify it when he was there in 16 and 17. So not being able to bring Jeremy back, I think, was the first in a few dominoes that fell that ultimately drove Nick Saban to retire. But the way it's all worked out, I think it's been worked out beautifully for Alabama, because Greg Byrne's a great athletic director. He had a plan. He knew, months ago that this could happen. So he was prepared. He had a list. And so they were able to execute the search and get Kalen DeBoer.
Well, and that's something I was going to lead to. You said that you had heard back in October to keep an eye on Kalen DeBoer. I could argue Kalen DeBoer is a great hire. I could argue he's a bad hire, fine. But the point is, it was obvious that Alabama knew who they wanted from the get, and that was a very intent coaching search of getting one guy. I thought, correct me if I'm wrong, which is about the opposite of what a lot of Tennessee coaching searches have been.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would agree. But I've been through some Alabama coaching searches that weren't very well executed. But Greg Byrne is the best athletic director Alabama's ever had, in my opinion. And he was the son of an athletic director. He knows how it works. And I think the difference is, even when Coach Bryant retired and Ray Perkins was chosen, the structure and alignment is so strong at Alabama right now with Stuart Bell, the president, and then the athletic director, Greg Byrne. And, when you look at Nate Oates, and you follow basketball just like football, and in Tennessee, and Rick Barnes done a great job. But Nate Oates could have left 4 or 5 times. And if the AD wasn't as good as Greg Byrne and getting him what he needs and getting boosters to step up and give him NIL money and facility upgrades, then I'm telling you, then Nate Oates would have left. Because he could have gone to Michigan a couple of times. He could have gone to Kentucky. He took his name out early. He could have gone to Louisville twice. But they're giving him what he wants, and so he's been staying. And so that's really huge, because Tennessee looks like they're on that path right now with Danny White. That's why Tony Vitello, who just won a national championship, trust me, Tony Vitello could have gone to Texas. He could have gone to Texas A&M. He could have gone to LSU. He's the most wanted man in college baseball probably right now, but he stayed because they're giving him the upgrades he wants. They're giving him the leeway to run the program that he wants. And I think Danny White's done a great job as athletic director and is making him comfortable. And if you have a strong athletic director, that's a lot of times when you see coaches move, especially in multiple sports at a school, it's because you don't have the alignment in the president's office and the AD's office where they're comfortable in being there. And I think that's why Tony Vitello stayed and won a national championship this year at Tennessee. And that's why Alabama, I think, has the best roster of coaches that they've had in athletics-wise across the board in a long time.
Drew DeArmond, how do we follow your work, sir?
It's at Drew D 977 ESPN. My station is 977 ESPN in Huntsville, and we host Talking Ball with Scott Tyson and myself 7 to 9 a.m. Monday through Friday. And we always enjoy the conversation. We thank you for the opportunity to connect with your listeners.
Yeah, it's great stuff. We appreciate that. More brought to you by our good friends at Work Trucks and Volunteer Automotive Group, live from Dallas, Texas. SEC Media Days off the Oak Sport.
That was Drew DeArmond with Dave Hooker, and I just thought that was some explosive information. So it sounds like Nick Saban would have stayed if he could have gotten staff members on one-year deals, which he could have gotten Jeremy Pruitt on, but Jeremy Pruitt's violations at Tennessee, calls to show calls, which forced Nick Saban to look elsewhere because the NCAA wasn't going to let him hire Jeremy Pruitt. The reason that stands out to me, too, is because of the extra work Nick Saban had to do last year with the staff. That is true. What's untalked about, and I've talked about this as it being Nick Saban's best coaching job ever, was that he pretty much took over the offense in week 4 and simplified it and forced Jalen Milroe back in as a starter and said, we're going to be a first read and run guy. I'm going to run the offense, while he also had to run the defense because he couldn't get Jeremy Pruitt there. If he could have had Jeremy Pruitt there and had a little bit less, had not had to focus on everything, we might have had a bit of a different story. That's a very intriguing insight by Drew DeArmond. We've got one more interview to show you today, and it's with Frangie to discuss the Gators. But before we do, once again, this show is brought to you by, and all of our SEC Media Days coverage, by the way, is brought to you by Work Trucks. We're all about trucks that are actually available, trucks that help you maximize your profits by having the right work vehicle now. Time is money. The perfect work vehicle doesn't break down and has all the space to carry out what you need. That's what Work Trucks is intent on offering, while other dealerships just can't do it. Contracting is about time. Work Trucks saves you time with less back and forth trips and trucks that pass the highest standards to be put to work. The process is also quick and easy when choosing a vehicle for work trucks. Cargo vans, utility body trucks with the Knapheide work bodies installed. Pickup trucks of all sizes, and anything special like cranes or dump trucks. Work Trucks supplies vehicles to people just like you and gets you back on the road tomorrow. No dealership runaround. If you're a contractor, you need to know Work Trucks, and that's a fact. Service industry, remember Work Trucks. Work Trucks carries the trucks that your business has to have. You need Work Trucks. Clinton Highway in Knoxville and in downtown Birmingham. For the entire inventory, go online to worktrucksllc.com. worktrucksllc.com with an X. Why risk chancing your future and business on a wrong piece of equipment that burns your time? worktrucksllc.com. Work Trucks will also work to make sure you have the perfect vehicle you have to have. They'll even find a perfect truck, outfit it, and make sure it fits your needs to a T. Work Trucks with an X, LLC.com. worktrucksllc.com. Proud supporter of the Tennessee Vols. All right, so next up, what's in store for Billy Napier? That's kind of one of the big questions that we're bringing in. So I want to ask again, what's in store for Billy Napier at Florida? Because I think he's a dead man walking. I thought that based on his SEC Media Days interview. And quite honestly, many people seem to agree, but people close to the program think he's got a bit longer of a leash. Dave Hooker spoke with Frangie, who covers the Gators, to get his thoughts. Let's take a listen to how that conversation went, because it's kind of interesting, and I'm not sure if I fully agree.
Welcome back as we broadcast live from SEC Media Days in Dallas, Texas. Frank Frangie, a friend of the program. That doesn't sound right yet, saying Dallas.
You know it doesn't. And listen, this is a great setup for it, Dave. But I need my SEC in Birmingham or Atlanta or even Nashville. I need my SEC back in SEC country. So I don't think we'll do this very often, but I got to get used to it. It's a great setup. It's just not SEC.
You're with 1010XL, also the voice of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So you do a lot. But let's talk about Florida for a second. How confident are you that you'll be interviewing Billy Napier a year from now?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? I am 50-50. I hope I am, because I think the last thing Florida needs is to do this all over again. The last thing they need is to fire another coach. This is only his third year. I think he's going to be pretty good. He's a good program builder. He's a good culture builder. He's a good person. He understands the infrastructure of it all. I think he's pretty good. I really do. The concerns are they look dysfunctional last year. That can't happen again. They can't have 10 men on the field for field goals and blow timeouts and look poorly coached. And they've got to win a certain amount of games against a brutal schedule. It's a hard schedule. So I saw someone that maybe one of the hardest schedules of all time in college football. So I think he's the right guy to lead the program. I really believe that. I don't know if he's a great sideline coach. That's what the fans are all upset about. And if he doesn't get to those 6 or 7 wins, he's probably not going to be back. So I'd say 50-50.
But how can you be a better sideline coach, or is that innate?
You know, it's funny you said that. I'm not sure Dabo Swinney was a great sideline coach, but he was such a great program builder. He was such a great culture builder. Kids trusted him, and he got better on the sideline. Kirby Smart is the best coach in college football right now. Made some unusually uncharacteristic decisions when he got the job, because neither one of them had ever been a head coach before. Now Billy had been a head coach, so yeah, I think you can eliminate some of the dysfunction. Can you blink your eyes and become Steve Spurrier? Probably not. But can you eliminate some of the dysfunction? I think so, and I think that's what they have to do.
I don't want to talk about a possible replacement before a guy potentially loses his job, but I am going to. Would Florida call Lane Kiffin?
Yeah, and I think Lane would take the job. I think they'd call Lane, and I think Lane would take the job. And look, if you're not going to have the current coach, you're not going to have Billy Napier, you want to go get a star. It's time to get a star. But again, I can't say this strongly enough. I've covered that program and been around the program for 40 years. I know it pretty well. I knew it pre-Spurrier. I knew it during Spurrier and Urban. I know it now. The last thing that thing needs, and I mean this in all my heart, is to blow it up again. Because the next guy's going to come in. Even though I think Napier's starting to build it a little, The next guy's going to come in, and he's going to have the press conference, and he's going to look all sharp in the suit, and he's going to get all the fans excited. You know what he's going to say, Dave? He's going to say, well, we got to build it. So here comes the building process again. I don't think you need that. I think that would be a mistake, so hope it doesn't happen. And by the way, I think they've got a decent team. I just think, goodness gracious, they're playing Georgia, they're playing at Tennessee, they're playing at Texas, they're playing at Florida State, they're playing LSU, they're playing Ole Miss. They opened the season with Miami, who's going to be pretty good this year. It's just an enormously difficult schedule. So I think they've got a decent team. I think they've got a 7 or 8 win team, 9-win team, but I don't know if they can hold up against that group of opponents.
Can Kirby Smart be the elder statesman of the SEC now that Nick Saban's gone?
You know, I told him this. I had him on yesterday, and I said, listen, back in the day when Spurrier came through in the 90s, all the heads turned. Oh, there's the ball coach. What's he going to say? Then later when Nick came through,
that's true.
All the heads turned. There's Nick. I said, Kirby, you're that guy. And he's, Frank, I'm not that guy. I said, no, you are. You're that guy. He doesn't want to be that guy. But he is that guy. He's the guy. He still looks young as heck, doesn't he?
He does.
He looks like he's 10 years out of college. But I think he's the right. I think he's a great coach. I think they've got a great program. I think what they're doing at Georgia is how you do it. I don't think that thing's slowing down anytime soon. So yes, I think he is that, and I think he fits that well. He's a good dude too. Kirby Smart is a good person. He's a good coach. He's fun to be around. I don't see that thing changing anytime soon.
I love to get some people's impressions of Tennessee from the outside, kind of looking in. You've seen Josh Heupel now a few years. What do you make of him and what he's doing in Knoxville?
Love him. Love what they're doing. Love how fast they play. Love how they play offensively. Love the fact that he's a regular guy that doesn't take himself too seriously. We had him on. You talk to him all the time, no doubt. We had him on yesterday. Dave, when he got talking, I asked him about it. Because I heard him say it at the podium, so I asked him about it on our show. When he got talking about going to Omaha with his kids and sitting there with Rick Barnes and Peyton and all the people, he was like a little kid. I really like that about him. I think he's a regular dude, man. The same thing about Kirby Smart. I think he's a regular guy. I think Josh is too. Oh, I love what he's doing in Tennessee. I love what he's doing in Tennessee. And I'm glad that they play at Oklahoma this year, because I would hate to see Tennessee lose him to Oklahoma. That's the question when you have a great coach. Mm-hmm. I don't know who it is. Are you going to lose him? You're going to lose Nick Saban to the NFL. You're going to lose Steve Spurrier to the NFL. If you don't have a big-time program, you lose him to a bigger program, or are you going to lose him to his home? Tennessee's a big-time program. Tennessee's a blue blood. Tennessee is not going to lose, and I don't think Josh is an NFL guy. So you're not losing him to a bigger program, because I don't believe anyone's leaving Tennessee to go to Alabama. The Lane Kiffin thing was weird. He just got there. He'd never done it. He'd been there a year. I don't think that's going to happen very often. I really don't. So the only danger you could ever have of losing is, can you lose him to his home? We played at Oklahoma, and I played at JUCO first. So, but I like Josh Heupel. Listen. I said this. Dang, Tennessee's about good at everything. I mean, give Danny White credit. They just won the title in baseball. Rick Barnes is in my opinion, one of the best 6 or 7 coaches in college basketball. They got that thing going. Football, I think, it's been a while. I mean, Florida beats Tennessee down there. We chuckle because Florida beats Tennessee pretty much every year. Doesn't matter who the coach of either team is. Florida pretty much just beats Tennessee every year. But I think that's about to change because of Josh Heupel. That's how much I respect him.
Interesting. Great stuff as always. Frangie, we certainly appreciate it. You've been a friend of the program for a lot of years. How much longer you want to do this thing?
It's funny. I'm 65. Okay.
You look like 45.
Well, you're very kind. I am 65. I'll probably call the Jags games for the foreseeable. As far as local radio, we'll see. I love doing it. I've done it 36 years, local, 42 in the business, 36 on air. I'll probably, my good friend Jimmy Himes got out of it. Okay, I told him he couldn't get out of it before I did, but he did it anyway. I don't like that. I'm angry about that. But I'll probably do this. At least 3-4 more years and figure it out.
Good stuff. Frangie, check him out again. 1010 XL in Jacksonville does a great job of covering the University of Florida. More after this from SEC Media Days in Dallas. I'm Dave Hooker, off Thug Sports.
That was Frank Frangie speaking on Florida. He had some interesting things to say, but I got to be honest, I'm not so sure I fully agree with him that it matters if Florida blows the whole thing up. I think when it comes to hiring coaches, you can just blow the whole thing up every time until you get the right one. I mean, I've never really felt it mattered. How many times did Alabama blow the whole thing up before they landed Nick Saban. I mean, they blew the whole thing up after Mike DeVos, and they blew the whole thing up after Dennis Franchione for 2 years. Then Dennis Franchione blew the whole thing up. Then they were on probation. Then they hired Mike Price, had to blow the whole thing up before they could even get a new season started. Then they got Mike Shula, had to blow the whole thing up again. I think if you have to blow the whole thing up until you get the right guy, that's fine. You just find the right guy to run the program. I don't really think I don't think you try to stick with a failing product just for stability. I do somewhat disagree with that. I think you give people chances. I don't think you pull the rug out from under them if you think they can. I don't think you pull the rug out from somebody if you think they are building the program. But if you're not building the program, there's no reason not to blow the whole thing up. Heck, Florida moved on from Steve Spurrier to Ron Zook in 2001. That kind of blew everything up, or 2002. And 3 years later, they're like, we got to blow the whole thing up with Ron Zook. We got to go get a new coach. So I really don't think that it's a big deal if you blow the whole thing up. I think if I were Florida, once you think a coach is a dead man walking, I think you need to move on from him anyway. That's the way I look at it, because it's hard for them to, outside of Jim Harbaugh, who never really was fully on the hot seat, I can't think of a coach that was coaching for his career in a season, saved it, and then went on to win a national title. You guys can correct me on the message boards if someone did that. If you guys know of a coach who really saved his career because of a season and then went on to have long-term success, let me know. I guess maybe Dabo Swinney did that because he went 6-7 in 2010 and then went 9-4 in 2011. But if you remember, in 2010, they had just moved on with Taj Boyd as their future. So I think there was a genuine belief that they were going to start to develop a little more. Funny enough, Billy Napier was on that in that program, and I think Dabo Swinney had moved on from Billy Napier. But if you guys know others, please let me know. When we come back, we got one more thing to talk about, and it has to do with play calling involving Josh Heupel. There is some interesting news when it comes to play calling. By the way, just a quick congratulations to Tony Vitello, who has been named Coach of the Year in baseball. I don't think it was a shock to anybody that he was. But yes, Tony Vitello has been named Coach of the Year. When we return, we will discuss play calling as Tennessee and Josh Heupel are making an interesting play calling decision. We'll get to that in a second.
Cab 4x4 STX 45,985. 24 Ford Escape 30,962. 24 Ford Maverick XLT 32,720. Ray Varner Ford, your East Tennessee Ford dealership.
Sports Treasures in North Knoxville is one of the South's largest sports cards and memorabilia dealers, featuring over 10 million sports cards from vintage to modern. Sports Treasures carries a full line of hobby boxes, singles, autographed memorabilia, Tennessee Vol collectibles, fan cave decorations, and so much more. See a museum full of collectibles at Sports Treasures, 4819 North Broadway in Fountain City, and Sports Treasures on Facebook. Sports Treasures, where the real sports fan goes to shop.
Have you seen the latest TriStar Hats Co. product?
TriStar Hats Co.? What's that?
You know, those really cool hats, shirts, tumblers, and even license plates with 3 stars like the official Tennessee flag and stripes like the American flag. Pretty patriotic if you ask me.
Ah, gotcha. Seen those. Those are cool. Where can I get them?
Simple. TriStarHatsCo.com. And if you order now, there's 10% on any order $50 or more. Plus, use the promo code HOOKED.
With the promo code HOOKED, you get 10% off. That's hooked.
And don't forget free shipping with any order over $50. Stock up at TriStarHatsCo.com. That's TriStarHatsCo.com. There are plenty of wannabes out there, so make sure you go to TriStarHatsCo.com for the best quality and customer service.
Will do, and I'll be sure to use the promo code HOOKED. That's hooked when I do, to save an additional 10% off. TriStarHatsCo.com.
TriStar Hats Co. is a trademark of TriStar Hats Co. LLC. Any use without express written consent is prohibited.
Now in its 45th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Neubert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that.
Joe Neubert Collision Center.
All right, guys, welcome back to Off the Hook Sports. Before we let you out of here, we have to talk about some play calling news. After Tennessee's appearance at SEC Media Days on Tuesday, Josh Heupel actually revealed to Chris Lowe a new play calling plan for Tennessee this fall, which is that in addition to him being the primary play caller with Joey Halzle as the offensive coordinator, Glenn Ellerbe is going to join Halzle as the guy involved in play calling duties to help Josh Heupel. Ellerbe is Heupel's offensive line coach. They have worked together for 9 years. And honestly, this is a shocking development. It's shocking actually for a few reasons. First off, it's not that common for offensive line coaches to become offensive coordinators anyway. It happens. I mean, Philip Fulmer was a line coach and became a head coach. Sharon Moore was a line coach at Michigan and has become a head coach. They both were offensive coordinators first. Jim Chaney was an offensive line coach. That was his specialty. But typically you think of your offensive coordinators to be quarterbacks coaches. Tennessee has been unique. Alex Golesh was a tight ends coach and was an offensive coordinator. But it's a little odd that Josh Heupel would do it because Glenn Ellerbe seemed like a guy that was specifically there to develop the offensive line to complement the system that Josh Heupel runs. So to have Ellerbe in there with play calling duties, it's kind of odd. And there's a few ways I want to go with this. One, there's a positive. Maybe this is more proof that Josh Heupel develops his offense in a system around the trenches. And he believes in the trenches and he believes in physicality and being able to run the ball. And we always knew that. Like the idea that it was all finesse drove him crazy because if you really looked at his offense, that wasn't the case. They want the vertical rushing attack. And that seems more true now. It seems like he wants to make that a basis of the offense and even more of a focal point. But this could also be a concern. What if he doesn't believe in Joey Halzle? Now, I said blaming Halzle last year was unfair. He didn't go get Joe Milton. That was Josh Heupel, and Joe Milton was not a fit for this offense. But beyond Joe Milton, I got to give Joe Milton a break. Joe Milton lost his go-to receiver in Brew McCoy to an injury. He lost his second number 2 receiver in Dante Thornton to an injury. He spent the first half of the season without his center in Cooper Mays, and there was no backup, and the offense desperately needs Cooper Mays to go. And then he didn't have a lot of help from the defense down the stretch, not just because of the secondary, but because the linebacker in the heart of the defense to keep everybody in line, Keenan Peely, went down with a season-ending injury. And Elijah Herring, that was the first game of the year, and Elijah Herring, while smart, was just not athletic enough to fill that void. So Joe Milton had a lot of his own unfortunate situations, but Joey Halzle was limited and was with Joe Milton, and Milton was limited with the offensive weapons in general, as was Halzle. So to compare Halzle to what Alex Golesh had to work with the year before was just totally unfair. However, there were always red flags when coordinators or assistants are assistants for a long time before they're promoted. There's a reason, for instance, guys, that John Chavis never got a head coaching job. There's a reason it took so long to hire Brent Venables as a head coach. Now, you could say the same thing with Kirby Smart and Mark Richt, the 2 Georgia head coaches back-to-back, but honestly, if you really know the inner workings of that, Kirby Smart and Mark Richt both were longtime coordinators and were just waiting for the right hire. They actually could have gotten other jobs, but they didn't want them. They were waiting for the right place to go. Quite honestly, Joey Halzle was an assistant to Josh Heupel for years, back when Josh Heupel was an offensive coordinator. He left coaching college football to go into the private sector for a little while. Many people may believe because he was never promoted. He comes back, he still stays an assistant. First of all, he was an off-field assistant for a while. Then he was an on-field assistant. It took him 10 to 12 years to get promoted at all. And finally, after Alex Golesh leaves just for continuity, Heupel makes Joey Halzle the offensive coordinator. And then within a year, he did, with Heupel the primary play caller. And then within a year, he decides that Halzle's going to have to split some of the coordinating duties with Glenn Ellerbe. Now, you may say he's not really splitting coordinating duties. Now, and I want to be fair again to steelman this on Josh Heupel's favor, that he was always the primary play caller. That was the case with Alex Golesh. And the other point of this is, in Josh Heupel's system particularly, play calling is overrated. Most of it's what the quarterback does. The quarterback reads the safety. They run so much tempo. The quarterback reads the safety and makes a decision, and the quarterback has to call the plays on the field. That's the way this goes. But to have an extra cook in the kitchen just seems like Josh Heupel is just skeptical of what Joey Halzle can do. And that could be a red flag for Tennessee this year with Nico Iamaleava. That's one to bring up. Is Josh Heupel gunning to move Halzle out or demote him to make Glenn Ellerbe his offensive coordinator long-term? Did Glenn Ellerbe strong-arm him and say, I want this promotion because I'm tired of being a line coach and I'd like to try to move up the ranks a little bit, and Josh Heupel needs Glenn Ellerbe as his offensive line coach for now? Could that be the case? We don't know. There's a lot of reasons he could be doing this. Was Glenn Ellerbe already in it? I think another rational explanation is, look, there's a lot of play calling that goes for the offensive line. Cooper Mays does a lot of play calling for his unit and the line up front. And maybe this is why Glenn Ellerbe is getting involved, because he's got to work with the line. And also the other layer to this is helmet communication. Now that coaches can directly communicate to the field, you might see offensive linemen much more involved in play calling because they can communicate directly to their centers and people like that, I believe, what formations to do. So there's a lot of reasons that Josh Heupel could have made this decision to make Glenn Ellerbe a play caller, but it's a very odd one. And it's even more odd when your offensive line coach isn't just your full-on promoted offensive coordinator. Typically, if they're not an offensive coordinator, they're just locked in as a line coach, as a trenches coach for their career. And oftentimes very good at it. Look at a guy like Rodney Garner, who is a defensive line coach. I don't know how much hand Rodney Garner has in the actual play calling. I think in general, though, it's weird for Josh Heupel to have Glenn Ellerbe involved in the play calling when he's got the quarterbacks coach and Joey Halzle doing it, and also given his tempo and everything he runs. Maybe he's ahead of the curve. It's possible, guys, he's actually ahead of the curve on this. The root of this is that the play calling is mostly going to come from Nico Iamaleava and Cooper Mays, guys. Those are going to be the guys calling the plays. Josh Heupel's the primary play caller on the sideline. Joey Halzle is the coordinator, and then Glenn Ellerbe is going to have a hand in it. That's how this is going to go. And Elias brings up maybe they're transitioning to a combination sort of play calling, line formation, blocking scheme, and motion route. That's what I'm thinking. And I think it largely has to do with the helmet communication now that's allowed. So I think because of the helmet communication, you might see more things like this. You might see more play callers doing specific things for specific units, largely because of the helmet communication. And now they can direct formations the way they need to. Now, again, there's no quote-unquote passing game coordinator like there is oftentimes with other schools. But if you're going to do this type of play calling, you also could use Kelsey Pope to talk to his receivers, because a lot of this is about running the right routes. But I think many of them want the quarterback and receiver to be on the same page, and too many cooks in the kitchen can create a level of confusion. I think that's probably why you're not seeing Kelsey Pope have a hand involved in this. Glenn Ellerbe, a lot of what Tennessee does is the offensive line making the right calls, particularly in the interior. It's not about maintaining blocks in the offense. It's about blocking to a side or blocking directionally so the running back can hit the hole quickly, so the defense has to respect those 4 or 5 yard runs, because if they don't have to respect them, the deep passing plays in Josh Heupel's offense won't be there. That's always been the case. That's why running back is such a big issue for Tennessee this year, and I don't think they have the right guy yet, because they need a guy that can do that regularly 25 to 30 times at some points in some matchups, while also being able to pick up pass pro. We haven't seen that yet. So it's interesting where this is going to all end up. Again, Alex Golesh was a trenches physical type of coach who was an offensive coordinator for Josh Heupel too. But I also want to point out that Alex Golesh was a tight ends coach. Oftentimes tight ends coach are analysts, on-field analyst, which analyst is a new thing in college football with the way they've changed the rules. Now you can have more on-field analysts, but tight ends coaches are oftentimes on-field analysts. And so they kind of develop things schematically, and the tight ends coach is just a way for them to be on the field doing it. It's a glorified analyst role where they're actually on the field, but they can use them a lot more. But this could probably potentially help Tennessee's offensive line. Maybe even if Cooper Mays goes down again, maybe this is what whatever person filling in for Cooper Mays needed at center, is just more help and direction from the coaches. And with the helmet communication and Glenn Ellerbe, this could be how that happens. Once again, the show is brought to you by Work Trucks. We're all about trucks that are actually available, trucks that help you maximize your profits by having the right work vehicle now. Time is money. The perfect work vehicle doesn't break down and has all the space to carry what you need. That's what Work Trucks is intent on offering, while other dealerships just can't do it. Contracting is about time. Work Trucks saves you time with less back and forth trips and trucks that pass the highest standards to be put to work. The process is also quick and easy when choosing a vehicle for Work Trucks. Cargo vans, utility body trucks with the nap hide work bodies installed, pickup trucks of all sizes, and anything special like cranes or dump trucks. Work Trucks supplies vehicles to people just like you and get you back on the road tomorrow. No dealership runaround. If you're a contractor, you need to know Work Trucks, and that's a fact. Service industry, remember Work Trucks. Work Trucks carries the trucks that your business has to have. You need Work Trucks. Clinton Highway in Knoxville, and in downtown Birmingham. For the entire inventory, go online to worktrucksllc.com with an X. That's worktrucksllc.com. Work Trucks is with an X. That I'm talking about at the end of trucks, TRUX. Why risk changing your future in business on the wrong piece of equipment that burns your time out? WorkTrucksLLC.com. Work Trucks will also work to make sure you have the perfect vehicle you have to have. They'll even find the perfect truck, outfit it, and make sure it fits your needs to a T. Work Trucks with an X. LLC.com. WorkTrucksLLC.com. Proud supporters of the Tennessee Vols. I want to thank you guys all for tuning into the show today. We had a lot of great fun interviews. We still have more coming. We have more interviews that will be available tomorrow, including one with Andy Staples, our own Ron Slay. Dave Hooker caught up with him, and we're going to have an interview with Ron Slay coming up tomorrow. So we got a lot more fun to talk about. Ron Slay's going to talk about Dalton Connect and how's it take on Dalton Connect. By the way, happy birthday to Rick Barnes, who turned 70 on Wednesday, and continue enjoying SEC Media Days coverage. We're also obviously going to recap the predictions for the SEC, which always comes on Thursday of SEC Media Days. So thanks again for tuning in. For Caleb Calhoun, I want to thank Dave Hooker for doing the interviews. We will be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern on Friday. This has been a